Let's talk a little bit about employment. We may have talked about this in the last episode, but it's so interesting. I just love it. Talk about the example of flying to Germany for Oktoberfest, and I've contracted out my private plane, and I've got a pilot coming, and he informs me the day before that he's gotten a better offer and he's going to do something else.
Exactly. The reason we have employees, and that, again, I credit conversation with you, is the reason is not because an employee has, is cheaper, delivers things better. No, it's because an employee has a lot more to lose. He has skin in the game. In other words, he has something to lose more than that specific job. So if they've also have signaled to us employees, by being employees, someone who was an employee for 35 years or for 25 years in a large corporation, they signal to us that they're not free, and it's great. Sort of like so you have an employee, it's inefficient, but it's a good risk management tool because you know that they're not going to let you down when you need them the most. The reason we have corporations is to avoid having legal contracts, but that version that the employee is not someone, is someone who escapes that notion of contract, is to me quite central in why we have employees, because you want to own some people. And just like we have, a lot of people have country houses and that they don't use. It's much more efficient to stay in a nice hotel. It's because they want to know that place, they can go to it whenever they want to. If they woke up at midnight and decide to drive to their country house, they can do that. They won't do it, but they would like to know they can do it. So they don't want to share. And that's quite central, this idea of skin in the game. And that was also a risk management tool that the Romans practically have discovered so many things. I would say almost everything in one way or another. So the Romans figured it out because they never let a free person be a steward in a big state. They wanted a slave. And what's the reason? Because you can punish a slave. You own a slave, you can punish a slave. So if the person is caught cheating, the punishment is much harsher for a slave. So the steward was typically a slave.
Yeah, that was very deep. I thought about Joseph in the book of Genesis when he's the steward of Potiphar's house, and you're thinking, why is this lowly person given this control? Well, he's really smart was one answer, but it's not enough. It's that ability to punish downside. And of course, as a result of it, Joseph ends up in prison, really in what appears to be a life sentence, but manages to get out. But the point about having a slave versus a employee is a really interesting one, and it highlights something. Again, we talked about this in another one of our conversations, and it's so trivial, but it's so deep because it's so easily misunderstood. And the way you phrase it is, probabilities aren't the same as expectation. The odds of something being remote is not enough to mean you don't have to worry about it, because it depends on the consequences of that remote thing happening, not just the probability. So being wiped out by your slave or being able to punish your slave is really very powerful because it's the magnitude, not just the probability, that matters. And I think that's just it's incredibly obvious, but it's very deep because people forget it all the time. They say, "Oh, that's such a low probability event." Well, but if you die when it happens, it's more important than if you don't die. It's
exactly. Here you can look at it. You need a slave because you need someone who can be punished by a mistake, and an employee is never gonna be able to come back if he's developed a bad reputation. Nobody would hire him or her, but a free person can always manage. Because
you can only fire an employee, but you can torture a slave. I mean, it's not a very attractive thought, but that's the
true,
point.
But still, an employee, by firing an employee, they have more to lose than just the job.
Oh, for
Whereas
sure.
a contractor, when you fire a contractor, you can find another client. Firing an employee has more downside.
Oh, great.
And typically, these are people who want to stay in the job for a long run. They trade their freedom for reliability.
No, it's the same argument I make the hierarchy you're suggesting is contractor, employee, slave. And employee is getting close to slave because they have more at stake than contractor, but not as much as a slave. But it reminds me of this argument I sometimes make about football coaches or general managers in sports. They are very risk averse, and yet they're in this highly competitive business, and it's hard to understand why they're so risk averse. But the answer is there's a decent chance that if they mess up, they'll never get that job again. There are only 30 of them, say, or 32, depending on the sport. And as a result, they act very cautiously. You could say, well, but what's the worst thing that can happen that doesn't work out, the strategy or the trade or the draft pick? But it matters because the outcome isn't just unlikely. It's unlikely with effectively a death sentence. You may not come as in employment. You may not be able to get that job ever again.
Yeah, that's no. I mean, but in fact, I've observed somewhere that we have many more slaves today than we did in Roman times, because in Roman times slaves were actually sometimes freer.
And why are we so slave burdened today?
Because we have a more complex system that needs more reliable people. An employee is practically a slave. I mean, you think about it in these terms, right? He can't say what he thinks. He get fired. He can go on Twitter and curse at someone else. There's a lot of things they can't do. But it's not there that they're a slave, because they have to show up and give you their time, 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or sometimes 8 to 10 at night. Okay, so they have to give you so much, and they're scared. With a slave in Roman times, of course, they have downsides. They could be beaten. They could be crucified. The owner could do whatever.
Those are two negative things.
He wanted.
Yeah.
But a slave at a time, if you damage a slave, you can't sell him, so you lose market value. and with an employee, it's not the same. So it's quite. I haven't written much about it in Skin in the Game. Of course, so many other topics, but I'm certain that we have more people who are dependent today than we did Roman times.
It's an interesting argument. You do bear some cost if you fire your employees all the time. People are less excited to work for you.
But an employee is okay. Someone who sold you his work unconditionally. See, saying, okay, you got to report at 9 a.m. and come back. So why? Or sometimes if there's nothing to do, they still have to show up. So. Maybe you may have employees, of course, who are freer, but that's a typical standard. Why is that so? Because you want people who are not free, and this is why we have a school system to basically teach people to not be free between 8 and 4 p.m.
It's practice.
That's how it works.
Yeah, it's practice.
Yeah, they're broken in young and they learn, and so you have employees.
Reflections. There's a story in Nassim's book Skin in the Game which I think captures perfectly the essence of this idea. So I will now leave you with this story. In the famous tale of Ahikar, later picked up by Aesop and then again by La Fontaine, the dog boasts to the wolf all the contraptions of comfort and luxury he has, almost prompting the wolf to enlist. Until the wolf asks the dog about his collar and is terrified when he understands its use. Of all your meals, I want nothing. He ran away and is still running. Another aspect of the dog versus wolf dilemma, the feeling of false stability. A dog's life may appear smooth and secure, but in the absence of an owner, a dog does not survive. Most people prefer to adopt puppies, not grown-up dogs. In many countries, unwanted dogs are euthanized. A wolf is trained to survive. So the question is, what would you like to be? A dog or a wolf? Thanks for watching, and if you want to expand on these ideas, I highly recommend you checking out Nassim's book Skin in the Game, as well as the guide on shortform, which compiles all the key nuggets. I've been using shortform for the past 2 years, and it has boosted my learning with its vast library of over 1,000 book guides. They're not sponsoring this video, but there's an affiliate link in the video description and you can get a 5-day free trial and a 20% discount.